A warship stopped mid-battle, weapons frozen in the air, by a crying alien infant. No one understood why, until they found the human nurse holding it like her own child. Stay, and discover why compassion just rewrote galactic history. Tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe if you believe kindness can still win wars. The year was 2498, and Clara Reyes had learned to feel nothing. She moved through the wreckage of Outpost 7 like a ghost among ghosts, her medkit swinging against her hip, her expression carved from stone. The colony had been beautiful once. Now it was ash and twisted metal, another casualty in the endless Cold War between humanity and the Dravani Empire. Around her, soldiers searched for survivors. They wouldn't find many. The attack had been surgical, devastating. Clara had seen it before, too many times. She stepped over a collapsed beam, her boots crunching on broken glass, when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong in a graveyard. A whimper, weak, desperate, and impossibly small. Clara's hand went to her scanner. The reading made her freeze. Dravani biosignature. Juvenile. Critical condition. She should have called it in. Protocol demanded it. But her feet moved before her mind could object, carrying her toward a half-buried transport pod. The metal was scorched, the emergency seals blown. Inside, surrounded by shredded incubation gel, lay something that made her heart forget how to beat. A Dravani hatchling, no bigger than a human infant, covered in violet scales that shimmered like oil on water, translucent wings folded against its body, membrane torn and bleeding. Its eyes, massive and golden, locked onto hers with an expression she recognized instantly. Fear. Pure animal fear. The creature tried to produce the legendary Dravani roar. What came out was a tiny, broken sound. Almost human. Almost like a cry. Footsteps behind her. Sergeant Morrison's voice, hard as the rifle in his hands. "Step away from it, Reyes. Those things grow up to be killers. You know what they did to Jakarta Station, to your husband." Clara did know. She remembered David's last transmission, his voice crackling through static as Dravani warships tore through the fleet. She remembered the funeral with an empty casket. She remembered 3 years of numbness, but looking at this tiny, terrified creature, all she could see was something that had lost everything, just like her. She reached into the pod. The hatchling flinched, scales rippling from violet to deep blue. Clara's voice came out softer than she'd heard it in years. "You lost everything too, didn't you?" "Yeah, me too." The creature's scales shifted again, pale gold like sunrise. It made that small sound again, and Clara felt something crack open in her chest, something she thought had died with David. She wrapped the hatchling in her jacket, hiding it against her body. It was warm, surprisingly warm. Its heartbeat rapid against her ribs. "Reyes, what are you doing?" Morrison's voice rose. "That's enemy biology. We have protocols." Clara stood, her arms wrapped protectively around the small, trembling form. Her voice came out flat, final. "I'm taking it for medical examination, standard procedure for unknown xenobiology." She walked past Morrison before he could object, each step carrying her further from protocol, from sense, from the safe numbness that had protected her. Behind her, she heard Morrison curse and call command. She had maybe 6 hours before they came for her, maybe less. Back in her cramped orbital apartment, Clara laid the hatchling on her bed. It looked impossibly fragile against the gray sheets. She grabbed her medical scanner, her hands shaking for the first time in 3 years. The creature's eyes followed her every movement. Intelligent eyes. Aware eyes. "Okay," Clara whispered, more to herself than to it. "Let's see what I can do." As she worked, treating burns and mending torn membrane with surgical gel, the hatchling's scales shifted through a rainbow of colors. Blue when she touched wounds. Soft purple when she hummed without thinking. Gold when she smiled, just slightly, at a successful repair. By the time dawn light filtered through her window, the creature was sleeping, curled in a nest of blankets, its breathing steady and strong. Clara sat on the floor, her back against the bed, watching it sleep. She had saved countless lives in this war, human and alien both, but she'd never named any of them. She named this one Kyle. She whispered to the sleeping hatchling, "Your name is Kale." Outside her window, transport ships moved through the orbital lanes like schools of fish. Normal life. Normal routine, but in her apartment everything had changed. Clara Reyes, who had spent 3 years learning to feel nothing, suddenly felt everything. And in the corner of her vision, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A military patrol changing direction, heading straight for her sector. They were coming. The patrol never came. Clara spent the first night watching her door. Kale curled in her lap, both of them waiting for Boots in the hallway. But dawn arrived with only silence. Morrison hadn't reported her. She didn't know why, and she was afraid to ask. The first day, Kale barely moved. Clara set up a heating lamp, adjusted the humidity, offered water through a dropper. The hatchling drank slowly, those enormous golden eyes never leaving her face. The second day, Kale made his first sound that wasn't pain. A small chirp, curious and bright. Clara found herself smiling. Actually smiling. The third day, Kale tried to stand. His legs wobbled, wings fluttering for balance, and he face-planted into the blankets. Clara laughed. The sound felt foreign in her throat, like speaking a language she'd forgotten. By the fourth day, Clara realized Kale was growing, fast. His body had stretched, scales brightening to a rich violet purple. His wings, which she'd carefully stitched, were already healing, the membrane thickening. On the fifth day, Kale spoke. Clara was heating synthetic protein paste, the closest thing she could find to the Dravani diet specifications, when she heard it. A small voice, hesitant and fractured. "Ma, Ma." She dropped the container. Paste splattered across the floor. She spun around. Kale sat in his blanket nest, head tilted, scales shifting between violet and pale gold. His mouth moved, forming the shapes of human speech with a forked tongue never designed for it. "Mama?" He tried again, clearer this time. Clara's knees hit the floor. She didn't remember falling. Her eyes burned, tears she hadn't cried in 3 years, suddenly streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, baby, I'm here." Kale chirped, pleased with himself, and his scales blazed brilliant gold. He crawled toward her, clumsy and determined, and pressed his small horned head against her chest. Warm, trusting, safe. Clara held him and wept. She didn't hear her door open, didn't hear the footsteps until a voice spoke. "Holy shit!" Her head snapped up. A man stood in her doorway, older, weather-beaten, wearing a faded jacket with a USCM patch sewn onto the sleeve. Her neighbor, Miles Grant. Clara moved before thinking, putting her body between Miles and Kale. "Get out!" Miles raised his hands, but his eyes stayed fixed on Kale. "That's a Dravani in your apartment. You're harboring enemy biology, Clara. Do you have any idea what they'll do to you?" I said get out. "They'll execute you. Black site, no trial. They'll—" "Thank you!" Kale's voice rang out, small and proud. He peeked around Clara's arm, scales bright gold, and his tiny forked tongue wrapped around the words like a child trying on new shoes. "Thank you, nice man." Miles's mouth fell open. Kale chirped again, pleased with his vocabulary. He pointed at the spilled protein paste. "Food?" Clara sad. "Food fix?" Something changed in Miles's expression. The hardness cracked. He stared at the small creature trying so desperately to speak human, to help, to understand. A creature that should have been a monster. Miles closed the door behind him, locked it, walked slowly into the apartment and sat down on the floor, his movements careful, non-threatening. "My name's Miles, little guy. Can you say Miles?" Miles. Miles! Kale's entire body wiggled with joy, scales flashing gold. Miles' friend? Clara friend? Miles looked at Clara. She saw something in his eyes she recognized. The same thing she'd seen in her own mirror for 3 years. Loss. Grief. The hollow weight of surviving when others didn't. "Yeah," Miles said quietly. "Yeah, I'm a friend." Over the next 2 days, Miles helped Clara build a better shelter in her apartment's small basement storage. Thermal regulators, humidity controls, emergency exits. He brought supplies without being asked. Protein synthesizers, medical equipment, a small toy that projected light patterns. Kyle loved that toy. He called it Dragon Light and carried it everywhere, making it dance across the walls while he laughed. Clara watched Miles show Kale how to work the projection controls, both of them sitting on the floor, and felt something she hadn't felt since David died. Not just safety, community, family. On the 7th day, Kale fell asleep against Clara's chest while she sang an old Earth lullaby. His scales had shifted to a deep, peaceful purple, and his breathing synchronized with her heartbeat. Miles sat across from them, a cup of coffee going cold in his hands. "I lost my daughter," he said suddenly. "She was 6. The Jakarta station attack." Clara's breath caught. "I wanted to hate them all," Miles continued. "Every Dravani in the galaxy. But then I see this little guy, and I think—" He paused, voice rough. "I think maybe that's what they took from each other, too. Kids, families, maybe we're not so different, us and them." Clara looked down at Kyle, sleeping peacefully, trusting absolutely. "He brought me back," she whispered. "I didn't even know I was gone until he brought me back." Outside the window, the orbital lights dimmed for station night. Normal life. Normal patterns. But in Clara's small apartment, something extraordinary was growing. A bridge made of trust and tiny, awkward words. A family that shouldn't exist. Kale stirred in his sleep and his small voice murmured one word before he settled again. "Home. Hum." Clara pressed a kiss to his small horned head. "Yes, baby. You're home." But outside, far above the station, something else was awakening. In the depths of Dravani space, sensors had caught a DNA trace. A genetic signature thought lost. The signature of the winged heart. The imperial heir. And the hunters were already moving. 10,000 light-years away. In the crystalline spires of the Dravani throne world, the council convened in emergency session. High Chancellor Vorkith addressed the assembled lords, his scales the color of old blood. "The genetic trace is confirmed. The winged heart lives. The heir survives." Silence fell like a blade. Then chaos. Voices rising, wings snapping in agitation, claws scraping against ancient stone. The heir had been declared dead. The succession crisis had nearly torn the empire apart. And now this. "Where?" demanded Lady Sereth, her voice cold enough to freeze stars. "Where is the child?" "Human territory. A orbital medical station. The trace was found in civilian quarters." Vorkath's expression twisted with something between disgust and disbelief. "A human female appears to be harboring the heir." More silence. Then Commander Theron, massive and scarred from 100 battles, stepped forward. "I volunteer to lead the recovery mission." "You will bring the child home," Vorkath said, "and you will eliminate any witnesses. This embarrassment to the Empire must be buried. Understood?" Theron's scales rippled, but he bowed. "The winged heart will be protected, at any cost." Back on Station Meridian, Clara had no idea that the most elite warriors in the galaxy were coming for her. She was too busy teaching Kale to eat with a spoon. "Like this," she demonstrated, scooping protein paste. "See, spoon to mouth. Your turn." Kale grabbed the spoon with both small hands, his forked tongue darting out in concentration. He managed to get the paste halfway to his mouth before it splattered across his chest. His scales flashed bright blue with surprise, then gold with delight at the mess he'd made. Close enough, Clara laughed, grabbing a cleaning cloth. Miles leaned in the doorway, watching them. He'd taken to spending most evenings in Clara's apartment, helping with Keel, sharing meals, talking about everything except the war. It felt dangerous. It felt necessary. "Got something for you?" Miles said, pulling a small device from his pocket. "Encryption chip, military grade. If you need to call for help and don't want it traced, use this." Clara took it, understanding the weight of what he was offering. "Miles, you don't have to." "Yeah, I do." His expression was firm. "That little guy in there, he's special. Not just because of what he is, because of what he chose. He could have hurt you, could have run, could have done a lot of things. But he chose to trust, to love. That's worth protecting." Cale had apparently heard his name. He toddled over, still covered in food, and grabbed Miles's hand with sticky claws. "Miles, stay? Play Dragon Light?" Miles melted. "Yeah, little man. I'll stay." They spent that evening in the basement shelter, Kyle projecting his light patterns while Clara and Miles talked in low voices about the war, about loss, about what it meant to choose compassion when the world demanded hatred. It was Miles who brought up the question neither had wanted to face. "What happens when he gets bigger? Dravani grow fast. In a few months, you won't be able to hide him." Clara's hand found Cale's sleeping form, the hatchling curled against her leg. "I don't know. I just know I can't give him up. Won't. Even if they come for him? Especially then." Miles studied her face. "You know they will. Right? The Dravani don't leave their own behind, and if he's who I think he is—" He pulled up a file on his tablet, showing her intercepted intelligence reports, encrypted Dravani transmissions, search patterns, DNA traces. Clara's blood went cold. "The Imperial heir. Oh God, Miles, he's the most important child in their entire empire." Miles finished. "Yeah, which means they'll tear this station apart to find him. Clara, you need to be ready. When they come, and they will come, it's going to be fast, and it's going to be brutal." Clara looked down at Cale, sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. She thought of David, of the empty casket, of 3 years of numbness, and then she thought of Cale's laugh, his tiny voice saying "Mama," his scales turning gold whenever she smiled. "Then we run," she said quietly. "We take him and we run. There are colonies in the outer rim. No Dravani, no alliance. We could—" "Clara." Miles's voice was gentle but firm. "You really think a human and a Dravani child are going to go unnoticed? They'll find you, and when they do, you'll have no one to help, no backup, no options. So what do we do?" Miles was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out another device, a signal jammer, and something else, something that made Clara's heart sink, an emergency beacon, the kind that brought help, the kind that brought trouble. "We prepare," Miles said. "I'll start building defenses, nothing that looks military, just a concerned neighbor making his building safer. But Clara, you need to accept something. When they come, this won't end well. It can't. The Empire won't stop. They can't afford to. That child is their future." "He's my child too," Clara said, and she'd never meant anything more in her life. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She held Cale close, feeling his heartbeat against hers, and wondered how something so small could carry the weight of an empire's destiny. Cale stirred, half awake. His scales shifted to soft gold as he recognized her. "Mama sad." "No, baby. Mama's okay." "Lie." Cale's vocabulary had grown remarkably. He touched her face with a small claw. "Mama's scared. I feel. Scales feel." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm scared of losing you." "Never lose." Cale pressed closer. "I stay. Always stay. Promise." But even as he made that promise, 500 light-years above them, Theron's battle group dropped out of hyperspace and set course for Station Meridian. Their orders were clear. Their mission was absolute. Retrieve the heir, eliminate all witnesses, leave no trace. They would arrive in 3 days. Clara woke to the sound of distant thunder. Except it wasn't thunder. It was engines. Massive, powerful, unmistakable. She ran to the window and looked up at the station's transparent dome. Against the starfield, golden ships descended. Dravani warships, dozens of them, and they were moving into siege formation. Miles burst through her door. "Clara, move, now! They're here!" Clara's apartment shook. Somewhere above, landing gear screamed against metal. The lights flickered. Kale pressed against her leg, scales bright blue with fear, and Clara felt her heart trying to punch through her ribs. Miles was already moving, grabbing supplies, sealing the basement entrance. "Take Kale downstairs. I'll buy you time." The front door exploded inward. Not broke, not shattered, vaporized. One moment it was there, solid and locked. The next, it was atoms and smoke. Through that smoke, they came. Dravani Imperial Guard. 7 feet tall, wrapped in armor that seemed to drink the light, weapons humming with lethal charge. Their scales were black as the void, marked with gold Imperial crests. They moved like liquid death, filling the small apartment with crushing presence. And behind them, ducking through the doorway because he was too large for human architecture, came their commander, Theron. He was massive. Not just tall, but built like a mountain given wings and claws and teeth. His scales were deep crimson, marked with scars that spoke of centuries of war. His eyes, burning gold with vertical pupils, swept the room until they locked on Clara, and Kale hidden behind her legs. "Human female." Theron's voice was thunder carved into words. "You harbor the winged heart, the heir to the Dravani Empire. Surrender the child and your death will be swift." Clara didn't move, couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to survive. But something stronger held her in place, something older than fear. She spread her arms, made herself a wall between this monster and her child. "No." The word came out steady, clear, final. Theron's head tilted slightly. His guards shifted, confused by her audacity. This tiny human, barely reaching his chest, standing against the might of an empire. It was absurd. It was suicide. It was courage. "You do not understand," Theron continued, but something in his voice had changed. "That child is not yours. It belongs to the Empire, to its people, to destiny." "He belongs to himself," Clara shot back. "And right now, he's choosing me." Kale whimpered behind her, but didn't run. His small claws gripped her pants. "Mama, scary!" The guards tensed. Weapons rose. Clara knew she was dead. She'd known it the moment she picked Kale up in those ruins. But if she was going to die, she'd die standing between this child and anyone who wanted to hurt him. "If you want him," Clara said, her voice not wavering even though her legs threatened to, "you'll have to go through me." Theron stared at her. For 3 seconds, that felt like 3 hours. The massive warrior just stared. Then, slowly, he lowered his weapon. "Stand down," he ordered his guards. "Sir?" One guard protested. "Our orders." "I said stand down." The guards retreated, though their weapons stayed active. Theron took a step forward. Clara didn't back away. Even when he loomed over her, even when his shadow swallowed her whole, she held her ground. "You lost someone to my kind," Theron said. Not a question, a statement. "I see it in your eyes, the weight of grief, the scar of war, yet you protect one of us. Why?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Because I looked at him and saw what I felt. Fear, loss, pain. And I decided that maybe, just maybe, we've all lost enough." Theron was silent. His scales rippled, colors shifting in patterns Clara couldn't read. Then he did something that made his guards gasp in shock. He knelt. This mountain of muscle and scale and ancient warrior pride lowered himself to Clara's eye level. "What is your name?" "Human? Clara Reyes. Clara Reyes. You possess a courage that would honor any Dravani warrior. In another life, you would have been celebrated among my people." His eyes flicked to Kale, who had emerged slightly from behind Clara's leg. "But this child is the winged heart. Without him, the empire crumbles. Chaos consumes us. Billions die in civil war. Do you understand? This is not cruelty. This is survival." "Then survive together," Clara said quietly. "He can be your heir and my son. He can be—" Theron's communication device crackled. A voice hissed through in Dravani battle cant, harsh and commanding. Theron's expression changed, hardened. He stood, looming over Clara again. "New orders from the High Council. The winged heart is to be terminated, as are all witnesses. The Empire cannot risk the shame of this situation." Clara's world stopped. Kyle made a small sound, not understanding the words but understanding the tone, understanding that something terrible had just been decided. "You can't," Clara started. "I have no choice." For the first time, Theron's voice cracked with something other than command, anguish, fury. "They order me to kill my own prince, to end the bloodline I've sworn to protect, to murder a child because the council fears embarrassment more than they value truth. Then don't." Miles's voice cut through the tension. He'd been silent, positioned near the window. Now he stepped forward, hands empty, voice calm. "You said it yourself. You're sworn to protect him. So protect him from everyone, even your own empire." Theron's claws flexed. His wings twitched. Every line of his massive body spoke of a mind at war with itself. Duty versus honor. Orders versus instinct. Then Kyle did something no one expected. He stepped out from behind Clara, small, vulnerable, scales shifting from blue to gold, and he walked up to Theron's massive clawed foot. "No hurt, Mama," Kale said in his tiny fractured voice. "Please, no hurt, Mama." Theron looked down at the child, this small creature, barely a week old, who had chosen to protect his human mother instead of claiming his birthright, who spoke with a human tongue, who showed compassion instead of rage, the heir who had learned mercy. Theron's scales rippled through a dozen colors. Then he made a sound, deep and resonant, that his guards had never heard from him before. He laughed. "The winged heart indeed," Theron murmured. He looked at his guards. "You heard your orders. Execute them." The guards raised weapons. Clara grabbed Kyle, shielding him. Miles tensed. Theron's voice became steel. "I said execute them. The High Council orders the heir killed. I command you to kill him." One guard aimed at Kale. Clara braced for death, for failure, for... Theron's wings snapped out, catching the guard across the chest, sending him crashing into the wall. "But you will go through me first." The other guards froze. Theron spread his wings, filling the apartment with crimson membrane. "The child stays with the human. Any who object may face me in the old way. Single combat, to the death." Silence. Then, one by one, the guards lowered their weapons, not in submission, in respect. Theron looked at Clara. "When the rest of my fleet realizes I've refused orders, they will come, and they will not hesitate. You have perhaps minutes. Run." "Thank you," Clara whispered. But there was no time for more. Through the broken door they heard it. More ships landing, more boots hitting deck plating, an army descending. And this time, there would be no hesitation. They ran. Clara clutched Kale to her chest. Miles led the way through maintenance corridors that wound through the station's guts like veins through a body. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Boots, claws, the distinctive hum of Dravani weapons charging. Theron followed at the rear, his massive form somehow silent despite his size. Twice he'd stopped, turned, and unleashed hell on pursuing guards. Each time Clara heard screams, roars, the wet sounds of combat she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. "Left here," Miles gasped, sweat streaming down his face. He was 63 years old and running like he was 20. Adrenaline was a hell of a drug. "Service bay. If we can reach—" The corridor ahead exploded. Not figuratively. Actually exploded. Walls peeled back like tissue paper. A Dravani assault team stood in the breach, weapons leveled, scales black as judgment. The commander, smaller than Theron but twice as cruel-looking, focused on Kale. "The air!" she hissed. "Surrender it! Commander Theron, your betrayal is noted. You will die slowly for this dishonor." Theron stepped between them and Clara, weapons rising. "The only dishonor here is yours, Khalith. You would murder a child to please bureaucrats. I would preserve the Empire, as should you." The air crackled with violence about to be unleashed. Clara pressed Kale tighter to her chest, feeling his small heart hammering against her ribs. He was terrified, scales cycling through blue and pale violet, his small voice whimpering her name. And then everything happened at once. Khalith's team fired, not at Theron, at Clara. Miles threw himself forward, taking 2 shots meant for her. He went down hard, smoke rising from his chest, his mouth open in a gasp of pain. Clara screamed. Theron roared, launching himself at Khalith's team with a fury that defied description. And Kale stopped being a child. His eyes snapped open, brilliant gold burning like miniature suns. His scales flared, everyone standing at attention, glowing with an inner light that had nothing to do with reflection. His tiny wings, barely healed, spread with a sound like tearing silk. And he screamed. Not a child's cry, not a whimper or a sob. This was the voice of his bloodline. This was the sound that made humans name his species after legends. This was the roar of a dragon given flight and form. The wave of force that erupted from Kale's small body caught everyone by surprise. It was visible, this power, like heat shimmer given substance, like air crystallizing into a wall of pure energy. It slammed outward, catching the assault team mid-advance, and sent them flying backward through the breach they'd created. But more than that, it caught the shots still in the air. The energy bolts meant to kill Clara, and it froze them, suspended them, held them in mid-air like insects in amber. Then gently, Kale's power lowered the bolts to the floor. Harmless, diffused. The small hatchling looked at Clara, at Miles bleeding on the ground, at Theron frozen in battle stance. His scales were blazing now, cycling through colors too fast to name, settling finally on a brilliant imperial gold. "No," Kale said. His voice had changed, deeper, more resonant, still a child's voice but with something ancient underneath. "No hurt, family. Never." Theron slowly lowered his weapons. He stared at Kale with an expression Clara had never seen on a Dravani face. Wonder, awe, fear. His scales rippled through patterns that looked almost like a salute. His voice came out hushed, reverent. "The winged heart awakens." But Clara wasn't watching Theron. She was dropping to her knees beside Miles, her hands already moving to his wounds. The shots had been clean, through the chest, through the lung. He was still breathing, but barely. "Miles! Oh God, Miles, no! No, no, no!" Miles's hand found hers. His grip was weak, his voice weaker. "Clara, listen, in my apartment, storage unit 3, passwords, contacts, people who'll help. You tell them what you told me, about choosing compassion, about—" "Don't you dare," Clara sobbed. "Don't you dare say goodbye." "Got to," Miles smiled, blood on his teeth. "Someone's got to be the martyr, right? Make it mean something. Make this mean something." Kale crawled over, his newfound power already fading, leaving him small and scared again. He touched Miles's face with a gentle claw. "Miles? Miles, wake up!" "Hey, little guy." Miles's voice was barely a whisper. "You did good. Protecting your mama. Real good. You keep doing that, yeah? You be the bridge. Human and Dravani. You show them all how it's done. Miles, stay, Kyle pleaded. Please stay. I be good. I be so good. You're already good, kid. You're the best. Miles looked at Clara one last time. Tell them the story, Clara. Tell them about the old mechanic and the nurse and the baby dragon who taught them how to hope again. Tell them. He didn't finish. His eyes closed. His hand went slack. Miles Grant, veteran of Jakarta Station, father to a daughter he'd lost, friend to a cause no one else would fight for, was gone. Clara held him and wept. Kyle pressed against her, his scales black as grief, making sounds she'd never heard from him before. Sounds of loss, of mourning, and then, impossibly, tears. Actual tears streaking down his scaled cheeks. Theron watched in silence. His own scales had gone pale, almost gray. This human, he said quietly, he had the heart of a warrior. He had the heart of a father, Clara corrected, her voice broken, and he died protecting his family. More boots in the distance. The assault had only just begun. They were still surrounded, still hunted, still impossibly outnumbered. But something had changed. Cale had changed. He stood, his small body still glowing faintly with residual power, and looked at the approaching army with eyes that had seen the cost of violence. No more hurt, he said firmly. I am Winged Heart. I command. No more hurt. Theron's communication device crackled again. But this time, the voice on the other end wasn't giving orders. It was asking for them. Reports of the heir's power had already spread through the fleet. The child who could stop weapons mid-flight. The heir who wept for a human's death. The heir who chose mercy over vengeance. Theron looked at Clara, at Cale, at Miles's body, and he made a choice that would echo through the Empire for generations. The Winged Heart has spoken, Theron declared into his communicator. All forces stand down. I am assuming command of this recovery operation. The heir will be protected, at any cost. The communicator exploded with protests, demands, threats. Theron crushed it in his hand. Now we run for real, he told Clara, because the next wave won't stop for orders, won't stop for reason. The Council will send everything to silence this, to kill your son and bury the truth. Clara stood, wiping her eyes, holding Cale close. Then we don't run. We fight, and we make sure the truth gets out. Every species in this galaxy needs to see what happened here, needs to see what they're willing to kill to hide. You have a plan? Clara thought of Miles's last words, about telling the story, about making it mean something, and she thought of the one thing more powerful than armies or empires: truth. Yeah, she said, her voice hardening with purpose. I've got a plan. But we're going to need a ship. Theron's smile was sharp as broken glass. Then it's fortunate I know where to find one. Theron's ship was a war machine disguised as a diplomatic cruiser, all elegant curves and golden filigree on the outside, all weapons and armor on the inside. They ran through burning corridors, past panicking civilians, toward the docking bay where salvation waited. Or should have waited. The bay doors were sealed. A dozen Imperial guards stood between them and the ship, weapons raised. But these weren't the honorable warriors from before. These had the dead eyes of assassins, political tools, council enforcers. Their commander stepped forward, scales marked with the High Chancellor's personal crest. Commander Theron, by order of the High Council, you are relieved of command and sentenced to immediate execution for treason. Surrender the heir and the human. This is your final opportunity. Clara pressed Cale behind her. The child was exhausted, his scales pale and flickering. That burst of power had drained him. He was just a baby again. Scared, vulnerable. Theron didn't lower his weapon. Instead, he did something that made Clara's blood freeze. He laughed, deep, bitter, and utterly without humor. Do you know why they want him dead? Theron asked, his voice carrying across the bay. Not captured. not returned, dead, along with every witness, every recording, every trace. The assassin commander's scales twitched. The heir was lost through incompetence. The shame. The heir was never lost. Theron interrupted. He was abandoned, deliberately, on a human world, during a classified operation that the Council denies ever happened. The Empress never knew. The military never knew. Only the High Council. They chose to sacrifice the heir rather than admit they'd launched an illegal strike that violated the peace treaty. Silence fell like a blade. Clara's mind raced. They started the attack, the one that destroyed Outpost 7, that killed all those people. It wasn't rogue elements. It was them. A test, Theron confirmed, his voice heavy with disgust, to see if they could provoke humanity into breaking the treaty, so the Empire could claim justification for war. But the plan failed. The humans responded with restraint, and the Council couldn't risk the Empress discovering her son had been used as bait. So they declared him dead, Clara whispered, and hoped everyone would forget. Until you found him. Theron's scales had gone dark red, battle fury contained. Until you, a human whose husband we killed, chose to save one of us, and destroyed their entire narrative. Now they can't hide, can't lie, can't claim the moral high ground. So they'll do what cowards always do. Bury the evidence, murder the witnesses, erase the truth. The assassin commander's weapon didn't waver. Then you understand why this must be done. I understand that I've served the wrong masters for too long. Theron moved, not like a soldier, like a catastrophe-given form. His wings snapped open, catching two guards who tried to flank him, sending them crashing into walls. His claws found throats. His tail became a whip of bone and muscle that shattered armor. His roar shook the bay doors. He was 1 against 12, and he was winning. Clara grabbed Kale and ran, heading for the ship as Theron carved a path through his former comrades. The sound was horrible, familiar. War condensed into seconds of savage violence. She reached the ship's ramp and turned back, needing to see, needing to know if Theron would make it. What she saw made her heart sink. He'd dropped 8 of them, but the remaining 4 had spread out, circling, and they were good, professional. They knew how to kill their own kind. One of them, a female with scars across her face, had gotten inside Theron's guard. Her blade found the gap in his armor, found flesh, found blood. Theron bellowed in pain but didn't fall. Instead, he grabbed the female by the throat and looked into her eyes. "Tell the Council," he said, his voice somehow calm despite the blood streaming down his side. "Tell them the winged heart chose mercy, and that choice will haunt them for generations." He threw her aside, non-lethally, deliberately, and staggered toward the ship. The 3 remaining guards didn't follow. They'd seen enough. Theron, bleeding and defiant, had made his point. Clara helped him up the ramp. The ship's AI was already warming engines. They'd be airborne in seconds, away in minutes, but away to where? "The broadcast," Clara reminded him. "We need to reach a communications hub, something big enough that they can't shut it down, something public." "The civilian relay station?" Theron gasped, his wounds already beginning to close, but slowly. Too slowly. On the station's outer ring. But Clara, even if we reach it, even if we broadcast, the Council will deny everything. They'll claim forgery, propaganda. "Let me worry about that," Clara said. She strapped Kale into a seat, the child already half asleep, exhausted beyond measure. Then she grabbed Theron's communication device, the one he'd crushed earlier. She pulled the data core. "What are you doing?"
"Miles told me once that truth isn't just about what happened, it's about who tells it." Clara's fingers flew across the ship's console, accessing military communication protocols she'd learned during the war. Codes David had taught her before Jakarta, before everything ended, or maybe before everything began. She found what she needed: encrypted fleet communications, command hierarchies.
And something else. Something Miles had given her weeks ago during one of their late-night conversations. A list of names, of contacts, of people within the Empire who were tired of lies. "I can't stop them from denying it," Clara said, "but I can make sure everyone sees. Human, Dravani, every species in treaty space. I can make this so public, so unavoidable, that even if they deny it, the doubt will spread, the questions will be asked, and maybe, just maybe, the Empress herself will demand answers." Theron stared at her. "You're not just trying to save Kale. You're trying to start a revolution." "I'm trying to keep one more child from losing a parent," Clara corrected. "If that starts a revolution, so be it." The ship launched. They flew through the station at speeds that made physics weep. Behind them, an entire battle group tried to give chase, but Theron's ship had been built for war, and it showed. They reached the relay station in 3 minutes. Clara was already prepping the broadcast. Theron, despite his wounds, was routing power to the communications array. Kale slept in his seat, his scales flickering with dreams they'd probably never understand. "When we do this," Theron said quietly, "my life is over. I'll be exiled, hunted. I'll never see my home again." "I know," Clara said. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This broadcast might do nothing, might change nothing. We could die for a gesture that's forgotten in a week." Clara looked at Kyle, at this small creature who'd chosen to call her mama, who'd wept for a human's death, who'd demanded mercy when his bloodline had been taught only strength. "Or," she said, "we might change everything. Miles died believing we could. I owe it to him to try." Theron nodded slowly. His scales shifted to a color Clara had never seen on him before. Soft gold, the color of hope. "For what it's worth, Clara Reyes, I am honored to stand with you. You and that child of yours have taught me more about honor in 1 week than I learned in 3 centuries of service. Then let's make sure the galaxy learns it too." Clara activated the relay, hijacked every communication channel in treaty space, and prepared to show the universe something it had never seen before: a human woman holding an alien child, and daring anyone to take him from her. The broadcast lasted 47 seconds before the Empire's cyber warfare division tried to shut it down. By then, it had already been seen by 200 million beings across 30 systems. Clara sat in the camera's view, Kyle on her lap, and spoke, not with practiced rhetoric, not with grand speeches, just with the truth. "My name is Clara Reyes. I'm a nurse, a widow, and a mother. This is Kale. He's 7 days old. He's also the Dravani imperial heir, the winged heart, the child your government declared dead so they could hide a war crime." She explained it all: the illegal strike, the abandoned heir, the cover-up. Behind her, Theron stood in full imperial uniform, his presence validating every word. And beside Clara, Kale slept peacefully, his scales slowly shifting colors in his dreams. "They want to kill him," Clara continued, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "Not because he's dangerous, not because he's done anything wrong, but because he's proof of their shame, because he's a truth they can't afford to admit. She looked directly into the camera. "I don't care about politics. I don't care about empires or treaties or who's right in this war. I care about this child, and I'm asking you, every being watching this, to ask yourselves one question. What kind of civilization kills its own children to avoid embarrassment?" She held Kale closer. "He's not a monster. He's not a weapon. He's a baby who calls me mama and cries when he's scared and laughs at light projections. He's just a child, and if protecting him makes me a criminal, then I'm guilty. But I won't apologize, and I won't surrender him." Clara's voice cracked. "His name is Kyle, and he deserves to live." The broadcast cut out, not because they were stopped, because Clara had said everything that needed saying. For 10 seconds, the three of them sat in the ship's command deck in silence. Therian monitoring the response feeds, Clara holding Kale, and Kale waking slowly, confused by the tension. Then Theron's console lit up like a star going nova. "Clara," he breathed, "we're viral. Every major news network, every social platform, every species in treaty space is sharing it. The Council is flooding channels with denials, but no one's listening. The Empress herself has just demanded an emergency session. Clara, you did it. You actually did it." Clara didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted, empty. She looked down at Kale, who was looking up at her with those enormous golden eyes, and she smiled despite the tears streaming down her face. "Did we win?" she asked. Theron's expression changed. "Clara, we need to move now. Every ship in the sector just received kill orders. They're not trying to hide anymore. They're trying to erase us before the momentum builds. We have maybe minutes before—" The ship lurched sideways. Alarms screamed. Shields flared as weapons fire raked across the hull. "They're here," Theron snarled, taking the controls. The ship dove, rolled, became a leaf in a hurricane of violence. Outside the viewports, a dozen Dravani interceptors wove deadly patterns, their weapons painting the void with lethal light. Clara strapped herself and Kale into crash seats. The child was crying now, scales cycling between blue and black, his small voice calling for her over the chaos. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." The ship shuddered. Something exploded in the aft section. Emergency systems kicked in. Theron was flying like a demon, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, and everyone knew it. "The communications relay," Clara realized. "They're using us to triangulate. Every moment we stay near it, they get closer. If we leave, we lose the broadcast capability, can't send updates, can't maintain pressure. If we stay, we die." Theron's claws tightened on the controls. "Then we die broadcasting. Every second counts. Every moment, more species see the truth." Another impact. This one catastrophic. The ship's rear shields failed. Atmosphere began venting. Theron fought to compensate, but they were spinning now, tumbling toward the relay station's outer hull. "Brace!" Theron roared. They hit hard enough to crack bones. The ship carved a trench through the station's surface, tearing metal and scattering debris. When they finally stopped, hanging at an angle in the wreckage, Clara's ears were ringing and her vision was blurred. But Kale was screaming. Alive. Terrified, but alive. She unstrapped with shaking hands, pulled him free, held him close. "Shh, baby. I've got you. I've got you." Theron was already moving, despite obvious injuries. "Out, now. They'll be here in seconds." They stumbled from the wreckage into a nightmare. The relay station had been a civilian hub, shops, homes, normal life. Now it was burning. Bodies everywhere, human and alien both. Collateral damage from a government willing to kill thousands to silence 3. Clara wanted to stop, wanted to help. She was a nurse. It was her nature. But Kale was clutching her, crying, and she had to choose. Her child or her calling. She chose her child. Hated herself for it, but chose him anyway. They ran through fire and smoke. Behind them, the interceptors landed. Troops deployed. Professional, efficient, final. Clara felt it then. The weight of impossibility. They couldn't win, couldn't escape. Every direction led to death. Miles was gone. David was gone. Soon she'd be gone. And Kale would be alone, or worse than alone. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, holding Kale as they huddled in a destroyed shop. Theron was at the entrance, weapon raised, but even he knew this was the end. "I'm so sorry, baby. I tried. I really tried." Kyle looked up at her. His scales were black, not fear blue, not pain red. The deep, absolute black of grief. Because he understood. This tiny child, 7 days old, understood that they'd lost. And then he cried. Not a whimper, not a sob, actual tears, impossible tears. Dravani didn't cry. Their biology didn't allow it, but Kyle did. Crystal droplets rolled down his scaled cheeks as he pressed his small head against Clara's chest. "No, leave me," he whispered. "Please, Mama. No, leave me. I be good. I promise be so good. No, leave me alone." Clara's heart shattered. She'd seen horrors in this war, had lost everything to it, but nothing compared to this. This innocent child, begging for something she couldn't give. Survival. "I love you," she whispered into Kale's small horned head. "I love you so much. You're the best thing I ever did. You're—" Kale touched her face with a gentle claw. His scales shifted, not to gold, to something she'd never seen. Soft violet with traces of human skin tone, like he was trying to match her, like he wanted to be as much hers as she was his. "I love Mama too," he said. "Thank you for keeping me. Thank you for being my Mama." Clara couldn't speak, could only hold him, and in that moment, with troops closing in and death seconds away, she felt something she'd thought lost forever. Peace. She'd done it. She'd given this child 7 days of love, 7 days of safety, 7 days of knowing he mattered. And if that was all she could give, maybe it was enough. The troops breached the shop, weapons raised. No mercy in their eyes. Theron stepped between them and Clara, despite his wounds. One last stand. One final act of defiance. And then something impossible happened. The troops lowered their weapons. Not all of them, but enough. And behind them, more ships. Different ships, civilian vessels, freight haulers, personal transports. Hundreds of them descending on the relay station like a swarm, and they were broadcasting. All of them. Clara's message, Kale's image, the truth amplified by 1,000 voices. One of the troops, a young Dravani barely out of training, looked at Kale and then at his commander. "Sir, I can't. I won't. That's a child. You have orders. I have a conscience." Others echoed him, human voices, alien voices, unity born from Clara's 47-second plea. The commander's scales rippled with uncertainty. He looked at Clara, at Kale, at the burning station and the bodies, and the cost of keeping this secret. And slowly, impossibly, he lowered his weapon. "The Empress," he said quietly, "has just broadcast. She demands the High Council's immediate arrest. She saw your message, human, and she wants her son. Not dead. Alive." Clara's knees gave out. She sank to the ground, still holding Kale, unable to process what she was hearing. They'd won, against every odd, against an empire, against death itself. They'd won. But as medical ships began landing, as the tide turned, Clara looked at the bodies scattered across the station, at Miles's memory, at the price of victory, and she wept for everyone who'd paid for her choice, for everyone who'd died so one child could live. Kale pressed closer, his scales matching her sorrow, both of them crying, both of them broken, both of them alive. The galaxy had seen the message. Now it demanded answers. Within hours, 40 systems had erupted in protest, not just human colonies, Dravani worlds too. Citizens who'd believed their government's honor discovering it had been willing to murder a child to hide shame. The perfect image of imperial dignity cracking to reveal the rot beneath. Clara watched it unfold from a medical bay on a neutral station. The Alliance had evacuated them from the relay, offered sanctuary while the diplomatic storm raged. Kale slept in a medical pod beside her bed, recovering from exhaustion and trauma. Theron stood guard at the door, his wounds bandaged, but his vigilance absolute. She should have felt relief. They were safe. They'd won. But all she felt was hollow. "Miles should be here," she said to the empty room. "He should be seeing this, should know it mattered." "He knows," Theron rumbled. "The honored dead always know." Clara's tablet chimed. Another message. She'd received thousands in the past 12 hours. Support, threats, marriage proposals, death wishes. The full spectrum of galactic opinion condensed into a flood of communication that her systems couldn't handle. But this message was different, verified, official, from the Dravani Empress herself. Clara's hands shook as she opened it. The hologram that appeared was 7 feet of imperial majesty. Scales like polished obsidian, wings that could blot out suns, eyes that burned with the weight of 3,000 years. The Empress looked directly at Clara, and her voice was both gentle and absolutely unyielding. "Clara Reyes, you have my son. You have protected him when my own government abandoned him. You have shown him mercy when he should have found only death. I am told he calls you mother. I am told his scales shift to match your emotions. I am told he cries when you are sad." The Empress's expression softened. "I do not know if Dravani tears are possible, but I weep nonetheless. You gave my child something I could not: safety, love, the knowledge that he matters beyond his title. For this, you have my eternal gratitude, and my eternal debt." Clara's throat tightened. "But he is still my son," the Empress continued, "still the heir to an empire that needs him. I ask, not as an empress but as a mother, that you return him to me. Let him know his people, his heritage, his destiny. I swear on my bloodline that no harm will come to you, that you will be honored, that if you wish it, you may remain part of his life. But I ask you to let him come home." The message ended. Clara looked at Cale, sleeping peacefully, his scales soft violet. She thought about what returning him meant, about losing this child she'd known for barely a week, but loved more than her own life. About going back to empty apartments and empty hearts. She thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No." Theron's head snapped toward her. "Clara, the Empress is offering you protection, honor, a place in history. She's asking me to give up my son." Clara stood, walked to Cale's pod, pressed her hand against the transparent surface. "I didn't save him just to hand him over. He's not a political asset. He's not a symbol. He's Cale, my Cale, and he stays with me. You cannot refuse an empress. Watch me." But even as she said it, Clara knew the truth. She couldn't keep him forever. He would grow, would need things she couldn't provide, would have questions about his people, his power, his place in the universe. She could give him love, but could she give him identity? The door opened. A human diplomat entered, flanked by Alliance guards. She looked exhausted, like she'd been negotiating for days without sleep. Probably had. "Ms. Reyes, I'm Ambassador Chen. I've been in contact with both the Alliance leadership and the Dravani Empress. They've reached an agreement, pending your approval." "What kind of agreement?" "Joint custody. Cale remains with you, his legal guardian, but he spends time with the Empress, learning his heritage, growing into his role. You'd receive full Alliance protection, diplomatic status, resources to raise him. And when he's old enough, he chooses, human world or Dravani, your family or his bloodline, his decision. But until then, he gets both." Clara's mind raced. "And the Council? The ones who tried to kill him?" "Arrested." The Empress moved fast. "Public trials starting next week. She's using this to purge corruption from the government. Your broadcast gave her the leverage she needed. Cale's survival gave her the justification. She's reshaping the Empire, and she's doing it in your son's name." "My son," Clara repeated softly, testing the words, claiming them. "Yes," Chen confirmed. "Legally, biologically irrelevant. You're his mother. The Empress acknowledges this. She wants to be part of his life, not replace you. She's asking for shared custody, not surrender." It was more than Clara had hoped for, more than seemed possible. But something about it felt wrong, too easy, too neat. "What's the catch?" Chen hesitated. Kale becomes the symbol of the new peace, human and Dravani working together, raised by both cultures. He'll be watched, analyzed, every action scrutinized, every choice judged. He'll never have privacy, never have normalcy. He'll be the bridge between species, and that bridge will be walked on by billions. Clara looked at Kale again. At this tiny child who'd already suffered so much, who'd been used as bait, declared dead, hunted, and forced to unleash power he barely understood. Could she really subject him to a lifetime of being a symbol? Could she deny him the chance to change the galaxy? "I want to talk to the Empress," Clara said. "Face to face, before I decide anything." Chen nodded. "She's already on her way. Should arrive within the hour." The hour passed like a held breath. Clara dressed Kale in the only clothes he had, a too large human child's outfit that made him look impossibly small. She combed her hair, washed her face, tried to prepare herself for meeting the most powerful being in half the known galaxy. When the Empress arrived, all preparation became meaningless. She didn't enter like a ruler. She entered like a mother who'd lost her child and just got him back. Her scales were pale gold, the color of joy and relief, and her massive wings were folded tight to fit through human-sized doors. She saw Kale, awake now and clinging to Clara's leg, and she made a sound Clara had never heard from a Dravani, a keen of pure, overwhelming emotion. "My son," the Empress whispered. "My son lives." Kyle looked up at this enormous being, this creature that embodied everything he would someday become, and he tilted his head curiously. "Big," he observed. "You, very big." The Empress laughed. It was the sound of relief and grief and joy all tangled together. "And you are very small, but you will grow. Oh, my precious one, you will grow." She looked at Clara then. "Thank you. Words are insufficient. Gratitude is inadequate. You saved him when I could not, protected him when my government wanted him dead, loved him when the galaxy saw only politics. You are his mother in every way that matters. I ask only to be part of that, to know him, to watch him grow, to—" The Empress's voice cracked. This ancient, powerful being who'd ruled an empire for millennia was crying, actual tears rolling down scaled cheeks. "To not miss any more of his childhood than I already have." Clara understood then. This wasn't politics. This was a mother who'd lost her baby and was begging for a second chance. She looked down at Kyle. "What do you think, baby? Want to meet your birth mom?" Kyle considered this seriously. Then he toddled forward, tiny and fearless, and reached up toward the Empress. "You sad?" "I know sad." "Clara, teach me." "Sad means need hug." He couldn't reach her. Too small, too young. But the Empress lowered herself, carefully, gently, until Kale could wrap his tiny arms around one of her massive claws. "There," he said, satisfied. "Better now." And Clara, watching this impossible meeting between two mothers and one miraculous child, made her decision. "Okay," she said, "joint custody, but I have conditions." 3 months later, the trials began. The galaxy watched as the High Council faced justice. Every species, every world, every being with access to communication saw the evidence, heard the testimonies, learned the truth about power corrupted and honor betrayed. Clara attended with Kale, now 3 months old and the size of a human 5-year-old. Dravani growth was exponential in the early years. He sat between Clara and the Empress, his scales constantly shifting between his mother's emotional states, creating patterns of violet gold that had already become iconic. The evidence was damning. Communications logs, DNA records, testimony from soldiers who'd been ordered to abandon the air, video of the illegal strike that had destroyed Outpost 7 and killed David and hundreds more. High Chancellor Vorketh stood in chains, his scales the gray of defeat. "We did what was necessary for the Empire, for stability, for yourselves," the Empress interrupted, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "You risked my son, murdered innocents, violated treaties, And you dare claim it was for the Empire? You dishonored everything we stand for. The human woman dishonored us. Vorketh's voice rose to a roar. Took what was ours, corrupted the air with human weakness. He cries now? Did you know that? The winged heart weeps like a human child. You've allowed our future to be contaminated with... Kyle stood up. He was small, still a child. But when he moved, the entire chamber fell silent. His scales blazed with colors that hadn't been seen in Dravani genetics for generations. Human-influenced patterns, hybrid emotions, something new. You wrong, Kale said, his voice clear and strong despite his age. Crying not weakness. Crying is knowing, is feeling, is being alive to everything, not just angry and fighting. Mama Clara teach me. Mama Empress teach me. Both teach me. Power is not just in fire, is in knowing when not to burn. He looked at Vorketh with eyes that burned gold and human brown, a genetic impossibility that scientists would debate for decades. You scared of me because I prove you wrong. Prove that strong can also be gentle. That warrior can also be kind. You want me to be monster because monster easy to control. But I not monster. I am Kyle. I am human-taught Dravani. I am the one who chooses both. The chamber erupted in sound. Approval, shock, discussion. But Clara just smiled, so proud she thought her chest might burst. That was her boy. Her brilliant, impossible boy. The Empress's scales had gone pure gold. She looked at Clara, and in that look was understanding, gratitude, acknowledgement that what Clara had given Kale was something no Dravani could have taught. The trials concluded with exile for Vorketh and execution for those directly responsible for the attack. Harsh sentences, necessary sentences, but not without mercy. The Empress had learned that too, but justice, it turned out, had unexpected complications. A faction within the military, loyalists to the old council, refused to accept the verdicts. They saw Kale not as the future, but as contamination, and they decided to remove the problem. The attack came during the celebration ceremony. Clara was giving a speech about peace, Kale at her side, the Empress watching with approval. Standard security. Routine protection. Not nearly enough. The explosion took out the western wall. Insurgent Dravani warriors poured through, weapons hot, scales painted in war colors. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Kreth, landed directly in front of Clara and Kale. The heir dies today, he declared, and with him the shame he represents. Theron, who'd been honored as Kale's guardian and restored to rank, moved to intercept. The fighting was instant, brutal and desperate. Dozens of warriors on both sides. Civilians screaming. Fire and blood and chaos. Clara grabbed Kale and ran, not away from the danger, toward the control room. Miles had taught her something in their brief friendship, that sometimes the best defense wasn't running, it was changing the game entirely. She reached the facility's communication center and locked the doors. Kale was terrified, scales cycling through every fear color imaginable, but he trusted her, always trusted her. What we doing, Mama? Showing them why trying to kill you is the worst idea in galactic history. Clara hijacked every communication channel in the sector, every screen, every device, every way people could see or hear, and she broadcast live, not a speech this time. Just the truth, unfiltered, immediate. The camera showed Kale, scared and small, while outside the locked door violence raged. It showed Clara standing between her child and the warriors trying to break through, and it showed what those warriors represented. Fear of change, terror of progress, the desperate violence of those who'd rather destroy the future than accept it might be different from the past. My name is Kale, the small Dravani said into the camera, his voice shaking but determined. I am 3 months old. I like light projections and my mama's singing and learning new words. I am scared right now, very scared, but I know Mama will protect me. She always protects me, because that's what love does. The door buckled. Kreth and his warriors were breaking through. Clara stood firm. "I'm just a nurse, just a human who found a child and chose compassion. But if choosing love over hatred makes me dangerous to you, then maybe you need to ask yourselves who the real danger is." The door exploded inward. Kreth stood in the breach, weapon raised, scales the red-black of rage. No more words human, no more propaganda. The contaminated air dies, and so do... Theron hit him from behind. The two Dravani went down in a tangle of claws and wings and savage violence. Others poured in. Loyalists, insurgents. A battle within a battle. And Kale, seeing his protectors fighting, seeing Clara in danger, made a choice. His eyes flared. Power erupted from his small body. Not the defensive shield from before, something new. Something he'd learned in 3 months of studying with his birth mother while staying true to his human mother's lessons. The air crystallized. Everyone in the room froze. Not paralyzed, just stopped. Held in a moment of absolute stillness by a child barely 3 months old. Kale stepped forward, walking through the frozen scene toward Kreth. The warrior couldn't move, but his eyes tracked the small heir approaching. "You want kill me because I different," Kale said quietly. "Because I prove that being strong not mean being cruel, that having power not mean having to hurt. Mama Clara show me. When she could have left me to die, she chose to save. When she could have hated all Dravani for what happened to her husband, she chose to love one. That not weakness, that not contamination. That is evolution." Kyle's scales blazed, gold and violet and colors that shouldn't exist. "I am the winged heart. I am heir to the empire. And I say enough. Enough killing. Enough hating. Enough being scared of what we could become. We can be warriors and still be kind. Can be strong and still be gentle. Can honor the past while building better future. And anyone who says different is not my empire's future. They its past. And past doesn't get to kill the future anymore." The power released. Everyone staggered. Kreth fell to his knees, not in defeat, but in shock. He'd felt it. They all had. The sheer magnitude of Kyle's ability. The proof that this child, given time, would be more powerful than any Dravani in history, and he'd use that power for mercy. Kreth looked at Clara, at Kyle, at the impossible bridge they represented, and slowly his scales shifted from war-red to pale gold. "The winged heart has spoken," he said, his voice hoarse. "I yield." His warriors echoed him, one by one, weapons lowered. Rage bleeding into something else, something that might, in time, become acceptance. The Empress arrived with reinforcements, but the fighting was already over. She saw Kyle, still glowing faintly with residual power, standing protectively in front of Clara. She saw the surrendered insurgents. She saw everything her son had become. "You are ready," she said to Kale, "to lead, to teach, to show our people what we can be." Kale looked back at Clara. "Mama, come too." "Always," Clara promised. "Wherever you go, whatever you become, I'm with you." The Empress smiled. "Then perhaps the future is in better hands than I dared hope." That night, as the galaxy processed what it had witnessed, Clara and Kale sat on a balcony overlooking the Dravani capital. The Empress had invited them to stay, to make this place home, at least part of the time. "You scared earlier," Kale observed. "I felt it, through scales." "Terrified," Clara admitted. "Thought I'd lose you." "Never lose me, Mama. I choose you. Choose both mamas. Choose all of it. The Dravani power and the human heart. Is that allowed? Can I be both?" Clara pulled him close. "Baby, you're proof that both is the only way forward. You're not half of anything. You're all of everything that matters." Above them, stars wheeled in ancient patterns. Below them, two species that had been enemies for centuries worked side by side to rebuild what war had broken. And between them, a small child with impossible scales and an even more impossible heart represented something the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia. Hope, Real, genuine, unshakable hope. And it all started because one woman looked at an enemy and chose to see a child instead. 5 years later, the clinic sat on the border between human and Dravani space, a joint venture that treated anyone who needed help regardless of species, politics, or ability to pay. The sign above the door read, Reyes Medical Center in 6 languages. Below it, a smaller plaque, in memory of Miles Grant, who taught us that bridges are built with compassion. Clara moved through the examination rooms with the ease of someone who'd found her calling. At 44, she looked younger than she had at 39. Happiness did that to a person. Purpose did that. A young human girl with a broken arm, an elderly Dravani with respiratory issues, a Zentari trader with a nasty infection. Clara treated them all with the same care, the same attention, the same refusal to see species before person. Dr. Reyes? A nurse poked her head into the office. Your son is here. Clara smiled. Send him back. Kel entered, now 8 years old, and the size of a human teenager. His wings, fully developed, were folded carefully to navigate human-sized doorways. His scales had settled into a unique pattern, violet-purple base with veins of gold and traces of something that looked almost like human skin tone. Genetic impossibility made flesh. He wore human clothes modified for wings, carried a datapad filled with both human literature and Dravani history, spoke 6 languages fluently and was learning 3 more, the perfect blend of cultures. "Mama," he greeted, his voice deeper now, but still carrying that distinctive warmth. "I finished the diplomacy exam, passed top of the class, both human and Dravani students." "Ah, that's my brilliant boy." Clara pulled him into a hug. He was taller than her now, but he still tucked his head against her shoulder like he was small. "Your Empress Mother will be proud. She already knows. She sent a message." Kale's scales shifted to happy gold. "She says I honor both my bloodlines, that I prove integration is possible, that I'm—" He paused, suddenly bashful. "That I'm exactly what the galaxy needs." She's right. They walked together through the clinic, Kale greeting patients in their native languages, his presence a comfort to some and a wonder to others. The winged heart, the bridge between species, the child who'd survived assassination attempts, political coups, and 3 years of intense public scrutiny to become something remarkable. A person, not a symbol, not a tool, just Kale, who liked music and mathematics and made terrible jokes that somehow worked because of his earnest delivery. They ended up on the clinic's roof, looking out over the blended architecture of the border zone, human blocky efficiency mixed with Dravani elegant curves, different but complementary, like everything else here. "I've been thinking," Cal said carefully, "about my role, about what comes next. The Empress wants me to begin formal leadership training next year, full imperial education, politics, military strategy, all of it. She says at 10 I'll be old enough to start making real decisions about the Empire's future." Clara heard what he wasn't saying. But I don't want to lose this." Kale gestured at the clinic, the mixed zone, everything they'd built. "Don't want to lose being your son to become the Empress's heir. Don't want to lose the human parts of me to be properly Dravani. Is that selfish? Weak?" "It's human," Clara said simply. "And there's nothing weak about knowing who you are. Kale, you don't have to choose. You never had to choose. You can be the heir and my son. Can be Dravani and human taught. Can honor tradition while creating something new. That's not weakness. That's wisdom." Kale's scales shifted through a dozen colors. Processing, thinking, being the impossibly thoughtful child he'd always been. "Miles would have liked this," he said suddenly. "All of it. The clinic, the peace, seeing humans and Dravani working together. I wish I'd known him better." "He knew you well enough," Clara assured him. "And he died knowing you'd do exactly this. Be exactly this. A bridge that refuses to break." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over two civilizations learning to coexist. Then Cale pulled something from his pocket, a small projection device, the one Miles had given him years ago, the Dragon Light toy. He activated it and light danced across the rooftop, familiar patterns he'd memorized in the first days of his life, when everything was new and terrifying and Clara's voice was the only thing that made sense. "I keep it charged," Kyle said quietly, "to remember where I came from, who I was before I became all this other stuff, just a scared baby who got lucky enough to be found by the right person." Clara's eyes burned. "I was the lucky one. We both were." A ship descended toward the clinic's landing pad, sleek, elegant, the Empress's personal transport. She visited regularly now, splitting Cale's time between his two mothers, his two worlds, his two futures that were somehow becoming one. The Empress emerged, massive and magnificent, and Cale lit up the way he always did when he saw her. He ran to her, still young enough to be excited by his mother's arrival, and she lowered her great head to nuzzle him gently. "My son," she greeted, "you've grown. Again. Mama says I'm in a growth spurt." "Both your mamas say that," the Empress corrected with amusement. She looked at Clara, and in that look was everything they'd built together. Respect, friendship, shared parenthood that had seemed impossible 5 years ago, but now felt inevitable. "Clara, thank you for watching him today." "Always. He's my son, too." "He is." The Empress's scales shifted to soft gold. "And I am grateful every day that he is. Grateful that he has you to teach him what I cannot. Compassion without compromise. Strength without cruelty. Love that doesn't calculate cost." They shared dinner in the clinic, the three of them. Human food and Dravani cuisine side by side. Cale ate both with equal enthusiasm, his hybrid metabolism handling everything, and they talked about everything, about nothing, about the future Cale would help shape. Later, as the Empress prepared to take Cale home to the palace for his week there, Clara walked them to the ship. Cale hugged her tight, scales matching her bittersweet emotions perfectly. "I'll miss you, Mama." "I'll miss you too, baby, but you'll be back next week, and we'll call every day." "Promise?" "Promise." Cale pulled back, looking at her with those impossible eyes. "Mama, do you ever regret it? Finding me? All the trouble it caused? All the people who died?" Clara cupped his face with both hands. "Regret saving you? Never. Not for 1 second. Not when they came for you. Not when Miles died. Not when the galaxy lost its mind. You were worth every moment of fear, every drop of blood, every impossible choice. You hear me? You were worth it. You are worth it. You will always be worth it." Cale's scales blazed gold. Pure, absolute, unfiltered joy. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby. More than words can say." The ship lifted off, carrying Cale toward his destiny. But Clara knew he'd be back. He always came back, would always come back, because she'd given him something that crowns and empires never could. A home that wasn't a place. A home that was a person. A love that didn't demand he be anything other than exactly who he was. Clara returned to the clinic, to the work, to the life she'd built from the ashes of loss. And as she treated her next patient, a Dravani child with a scraped wing, she saw something that made her smile. The child's scales were shifting colors, blue to gold, fear to trust, learning from his mother that sometimes the scariest moments lead to the best ones. The circle continuing, the lesson spreading, one small interaction at a time. That night, Clara sat in her apartment, the one with Cale's room, still set up for his visits, filled with his projects and his books and his carefully maintained collection of light projection devices. On her desk sat a mug she'd bought years ago as a joke. "Mother of Dragons, sort of." She picked it up, filled it with tea, and opened her communications console. A message waiting from Theron, who'd become Kale's combat instructor, and still sent weekly reports on her son's progress. Another from the Alliance, asking if she'd speak at their annual Peace Summit. A third from a publishing house, wanting to turn her story into a book. She answered the important ones, deleted the rest, and then she opened a private channel. One she opened every night, to a frequency that didn't exist anymore. "Hey, Miles," she said to the empty air. "Kyle passed his diplomacy exam. Top of his class, both species. He's growing so fast, changing the galaxy bit by bit, just like you said he would. Just like we hoped." She paused, smiled. "I wish you could see him, see what your sacrifice bought. It mattered, Miles. It all mattered, and I promise to keep telling the story. Keep teaching what you taught us. That compassion isn't weakness. That choosing love over hatred isn't naive. That sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is protect something helpless and refuse to apologize for it." Clara closed the channel, finished her tea, and prepared for another day of building the world Miles had died believing in. Because that's what humans did. They loved impossible things, protected the helpless, built bridges when everyone else built walls, and they did it not because it was easy or safe or logical. They did it because it was right. Kale, 5 light years away in the Imperial Palace, looked up at the stars and thought of his mama. His human mama who'd taught him that the strongest power in the universe wasn't fire or fury or even the gifts of his bloodline. It was choosing kindness when the world demanded cruelty, choosing love when hate was easier, choosing to protect instead of destroy. He thought about the future he'd been born to shape, about the empire he'd one day lead, about the responsibilities that would only grow heavier with each passing year. And he thought about a small clinic on the border, where his mama treated anyone who needed help, regardless of species or history or anything except need. That was the empire he wanted to build, one where anyone could be saved, where compassion wasn't weakness but the highest form of strength, where the question wasn't, "What are you?" but, "Who do you choose to be?" His scales shifted to determined gold. "The power isn't in the fire," Kale whispered, repeating the lesson his mama had taught him from the very first night. "It's in who wields it, and why." He was the winged heart, the heir to an empire, the bridge between species. The child born from war but raised in peace. But more than all of that, he was Kale, Clara's son, Miles's legacy, humanity's proof that even in the darkest times, compassion can change the world. And he would make sure the galaxy never forgot that lesson. In a universe where humanity was often seen as weak, as prey, as lesser, one human woman had proved otherwise, not through violence or conquest or domination, but through the simple revolutionary act of looking at an enemy and choosing to see a child instead. And in doing so, she'd saved more than one small life. She'd saved the idea that kindness was worth fighting for, that love could conquer hate, that the most human thing you could possibly do was care when caring cost everything. That was the truth humanity offered the stars. Not that they were the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but that they were stubborn enough to love when love seemed like the worst possible idea, compassionate enough to save when killing would be easier, resilient enough to build when destruction was certain. They were the species that looked at impossible odds and impossible situations and impossible children and said the most dangerous words in any language. "I'll protect you, no matter what." And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to change everything. The end and the beginning. Maybe the real empire humanity built was never made of ships or soldiers, but of choices. Clara didn't win through strength or strategy. She won by daring to care when everyone else called it madness. And somewhere between fear and love, she proved that compassion isn't weakness. It's the hardest form of courage. So now I ask you, when the universe tells you to harden, do you still choose to feel? When every voice says, "It's not your problem," do you step closer or look away? If you stayed until the end, write the word heart in the comments so we'll know you're part of this bridge between worlds. Tell us where you're watching from, Earth, Mars, or somewhere even further. Subscribe if you believe kindness is the strongest force in the galaxy. Hit like if Clara reminded you what humanity means. And share this story so someone else remembers. Sometimes saving one child is how you save an entire civilization. See you in the next tale. It's already glowing in the stars above the end screen.